Now, Boris Johnson may be in Glasgow, but the sleaze row isn't going anywhere. More and more MPs are coming under scrutiny for paid work they do outside of their parliamentary role. Now I'm delighted to be joined by Alberto Costa, a member of the Committee on Standards and also Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Good to see you, Alberto. Thank you for your time. Now, we know you're a member of the Standards Committee, and as such, you can't comment on any future potential cases, and of course, we will respect that. But we do want to talk to you in general terms about how we can clean up politics. Now, in the debate last week, Peter Bottomley, your colleague, who is one of the, well, he is the longest-serving Conservative MP. He is father of the House, so the longest-serving MP, male MP, full stop. He said that the system actually works well. Now, does he have a point in that if the government hadn't tried to unsuspend your decision, then the rules perhaps do work OK at the moment? What do you think?
Well, good afternoon, Gloria, and it's always a pleasure to be on your excellent programme. Look, I do agree with Peter. I think the system does work, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. And I've been passionately arguing as a member of the Committee on Standards that we should be enhancing the system. And in fact, my speech was all about improving the system that we have. It wasn't about saying that the system doesn't work or that individuals involved in the system aren't suitable in any way at all. It was about improving the system that we have. And the 2 points that I made is that we need clarity in the rules that form the Committee on Standards and the Commissioner on Parliamentary Standards. And let me give you an example. The Commissioner, who does a really tough job, she's put in this unenviable position where she is the investigator of complaints against MPs, where she decides on whether an MP has broken the Code of Conduct, and she presents her findings to the Committee on Standards. And that's all fine and well. But then she has this other role. After she's made her presentations and after an MP might have made his or her representations, she's back in the room during deliberations to be an advisor to the committee. And at the very least, there's a perception there that there's a confusion with the roles. And I'm very confident that going forward, the long-standing pleas that I've made that we need clarity on this role, I think will be listened to. And I think in due course, the House of Commons will come to separate these roles and give greater clarity. So that's one of the issues where I think we can enhance and improve the system. The other issue is having a better tiered appeal structure. At the moment, we don't really have any proper rules of appeal as such. What I would like to see the Committee on Standards evolve into is a committee with a proper appellate structure that very closely mirrors the structure that we've got for bullying and sexual harassment claims against MPs. Those are adjudicated by a former High Court judge, Sir Stephen Irwin, and I very much believe that the Committee on Standards should improve its systems by having a similar appellate structure to that, with potentially the involvement of former High Court judges like Sir Stephen Irwin, at least in one of the maybe higher tier levels of that appellate structure. But I'm very pleased that I think things will be moving in the direction that I've long argued, well before the present case, that we need to go to improve and enhance the system, not least for members of the public, so they've got full confidence in our standard system.
Let's explore that. Can you explain to us, how does a complaint get made against an MP? Is there strict criteria? Who can make a complaint? How does it work?
Anyone can make a complaint against a Member of Parliament, and rightly so. If anybody feels that the Member of Parliament has breached the code, then they can make a complaint. And the person that should receive that complaint is, rightly and properly, the independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. She's independent of MPs, but she is an officer of the House of Commons. And she has an excellent team that do the work, the very challenging and stressful and complex task of investigating complaints, at least the ones that the Committee on Standards tends to deal with. And it's then her job, once she's concluded her investigation, to decide whether or not an MP has breached the Code of Conduct, If it's a less serious breach of the Code of Conduct, she can use what's called a rectification process, where she can get the MP to offer the MP to apologise, and the matter can be brought to conclusion. If it's more serious than that, she would refer the matter to me and my colleagues on the Committee on Standards, and we would then give the MP in question an opportunity to be heard, present the case after the Commissioner, and then the Commissioner would come back into the committee to help us with our deliberations, to be present to answer any questions that committee members might have. And that's where I think that change needs to be made. It's that latter point, not the principal role of the Commissioner. I think the principal role of her being the investigator and decision maker and presenter of the case should remain. She does an excellent job in that, and I've absolutely no question about that particular part of the system. It's the part that I'm involved in which I think needs to be improved.
Do the rules on MPs' second jobs need to be tightened up?
Well, I would always say that the Committee on Standards, one of its principal functions is rightly to constantly review the Code of Conduct and the associated rules to make sure that they meet the needs of the 21st century and that they are empathetic to the changes in culture that we see across society. I think we need to be very careful. It's very easy to say, look, MPs, their primary role is to be an MP, they shouldn't have a second job. And when people say that to me, I often say, well, what would you do with the MP that's a doctor? Would you preclude the doctor from working in A&E? And we do have a number of MPs that are doctors. What about firefighters or nurses? So I think we need to be a little bit careful before we just get carried away and say, oh, blanket ban on all second jobs. But certainly let's have that discussion. It's important we discuss it. We should also bear in mind MPs aren't the only taxpayer-funded individuals that often have second jobs. Doctors themselves that work in the NHS, consultants, often work in the private sector and can make a very large sum of money indeed in the private sector, augmenting their taxpayer-funded NHS salary. So before we get perhaps too carried away with just looking at MPs, I think it's certainly fair to look at the whole of society for taxpayer-funded roles that might allow individuals to do second jobs.
I don't think people are worried about an MP working in A&E or being a psychiatrist. There are those examples on both sides of the House. They are concerned about a conflict of interest, that MPs are on a retainer by a company or a consultancy and are paid for that. And rightly they will think, well, why else would a firm or consultancy pay an MP if it is not to influence events?
I think I need to be very careful because I don't want to make any comment at all that touches upon any current media interest. So I've got to exercise extreme caution in what I say. But what I would say is some MPs do really good second jobs. For example, a lot of MPs write books. Some excellent MPs have written some fantastic books, and one's got to be careful that we don't say, it's not, you can be a doctor or a firefighter or a nurse, but you can't then, write a book. What about MPs that also present documentaries or appear in the media and are paid? Now, I'm not being paid to do this interview, of course, but there are some MPs that do media work, as you know, Gloria. I mean, you come from a background, you were an MP and you are and were an expert in media. So we need to be very careful. We don't just get carried away saying blanket ban on MPs doing second jobs. But certainly let's have that discussion and debate. And where that discussion and debate leads to, I'm open to looking at the Code of Conduct, looking at the rules again. And I'm sure that we will do that. Any appropriate committee and standards, whether it's a parliamentary one or whether it's one for solicitors or doctors, should always look at the codes of conduct that they have and make sure that they're in keeping with modern day thought.
Some people would question, and this is more an exploratory question for you so you can explain it, because some people would think, why is there a committee that exists to look into the behaviour of MPs, which consists of other MPs? How do you get on the Standards Committee as an MP?
That's, again, a very good question. I mean, I've long argued that MPs should be taken out of the adjudication of other MPs. However, there are counter-arguments that people who are not MPs have come to me saying that wouldn't be a good idea. So if in the adjudication process, if you didn't have MPs, if you say just had High Court judges, which is a view that I've long shared, that if you did just have High Court judges, they might not have the knowledge of the customs and practices of the House of Commons. And in fact, they might very well argue that you need to have some MPs on any panel that adjudicates in order to assist the judges. So there are counter-arguments, and I'm cognizant of those as well. And that's why when you look at the professions, whether it's the medical profession, whether it's the legal profession, the accountancy profession, you often have members of that profession involved at some point in the regulation and adjudication of potential complaints against members. And each regulatory body has its own system. But I think for us, we are very fortunate indeed in the House of Commons. We've got 7 excellent, hard-working lay people who contribute a wide range of skill sets and experiences to help in the process. But enhancing that process is something that we should not shy away from.
This question, I don't think it has any conflict or any bearing on the role that you perform on the Standards Committee. Some politicians, and it is a minority, and some journalists actually, also a minority, say, you know what, if you paid members of Parliament more, they wouldn't feel the need to have second jobs. Do you have any truck with that?
No. I'm comfortable with the fact that an independent body, truly independent of Parliament, it's called the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. It was set up, Gloria, you'll remember, lots of your viewers will remember, was set up following that dreadful MP expenses scandal before my time, some 12 years ago. And that body was set up by statute, by legislation, and it alone makes decisions on my salary and the salary of MPs. I have never had any involvement in adjudicating, and rightly so, on my salary. It is a matter for an independent body, and I'm not going to pass any other comment other than it's for them and them alone to make these decisions, wholly independent of MPs.
And the spotlight is also on the other place, the House of Lords, and whether peerages are awarded to some people who make generous payments to political parties. It's happened in both when there was a Labour government and also under this government. Does the House of Lords and its practices, could that do with a fresh look?
I think it's fair to say that, I think the House of Lords and House of Lords reform has been discussed since Gladstone and Disraeli's time. There's nothing new looking at the House of Lords and saying, can it be improved? Should we have more electoral mandates involved, etc.? So there's nothing new in that argument. It's a very, very long argument that we've had in this country for more than 100 years. And I can certainly add my opinion. I think that we do need a second chamber in this country. I think that many of the Lords bring with them a very wide range of skill sets and experience. The vast majority have had nothing to do with political donations or trade unions, but they come in, they're teachers, nurses, doctors, scientists. They bring a very wide range of skill sets with them. What's important is that the House of Commons is the de facto supreme governing body of the United Kingdom. And at the end of the day, we have conventions in place to ensure that the democratically elected chamber is the one that has the ultimate say, and long may that continue.
Alberto Costa, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much, as ever, for your time. Thank you.